Good morning. We were on the record in case number 2022-00012, electronic application of Big Rivers Electric Corporation for a certificate of public convenience and necessity to construct a 161 kV transmission line in Henderson County, Kentucky. My name is Kent Chandler. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission and will be presiding over the hearing today. I just asked for everyone in the room that if you have cell phones, that you please silence them or turn them off before we get started. If there's nothing else no housekeeping things to take up, we'll have an entry of appearance of counsel. So for the applicant.
Good morning, Chairman. This is Cynthia Santana on behalf of Big Rivers Electric Corporation. And we also have Tyson Kamath on behalf of Big Rivers Corporation.
And Ms. Santana, will you be calling the witness this morning, or Mr. Kamath?
Yes, Your Honor, I will be.
Okay, thank you. And for the interveners.
Commissioner, my name is Sandra Freeberger. I practice in Henderson, and I'm here for the interveners.
Thank you, Ms. Freeberger. And you represent, just so we're clear, it's
Robert and Shirley Harrison.
Greenville Farm, Cypress Flats, and then the Harrisons. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So I noticed that evidence of the public notice has already been provided in the record. It did indicate that anybody wishing to provide public comment remotely could do so by signing up at the instructions on the Public Service Commission website. As of about 5 minutes ago, nobody had indicated their interest in providing remote public comments. I'll just remind anybody from the general public that may be watching this in real time or in its recorded version prior to the submission of the case, public comments can be made at any time. You can send those to the Public Service Commission by email to psc.comment@ky.gov. You can send a letter to the Public Service Commission to 211 Sauer Boulevard, Frankfort, Kentucky 40601, or you can provide public comment through our website at psc.ky.gov. We just ask that when you provide public comments that you indicate your name, your address, and the case number, which in this matter is 2022-00012. Given that there's no one from the public here, I don't need to ask if anybody would like to provide public comment. We need to take under consideration, I need to take under consideration Ms. Santana, would you like to call your first witness?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Big Rivers calls Christopher Bradley. He's the Systems Operations VP.
Ms. Freeberger, while the witness is making his way to the stand, so what we'll do in terms of process is we'll allow Ms. Santana to introduce the witness, acknowledge the pre-filed direct testimony, ask if the witness has any changes to make to that, and then we'll permit you to conduct a cross-examination of the witness. Your cross-examination will be followed by commission staff's cross-examination. I'll ask any questions if I need to, and then we'll go back to Ms. Santana for any direct. Given the paucity of witnesses this morning, if you have any, we'll probably ask after initial direct cross-examination. If you have any additional questions, we'll go back around and make sure that we cover everything at today's hearing.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Okay, please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please have a seat. State your name and address for the record.
Christopher Bradley, 201 3rd Street, Henderson, Kentucky.
Okay, Ms. Santana.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley, what's your title with Big Rivers Electric Corporation?
I'm the Vice President of System Operations.
Mr. Bradley, have you caused to be filed in this matter direct testimony and answers to data responses?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any changes or revisions to those responses or testimony?
I do not.
And is it your intention to offer the testimony and data responses that have been pre-filed in this matter as your testimony today?
Yes.
Your Honor, we tender Mr. Bradley's witness
Ms.
for
Herber.
cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. It's all right if I remain seated,
That's fine.
Commissioner. And as to the request for confidentiality, I presume that I'm allowed to ask questions about what's been filed, even though there may be some pending.
Yeah, so anything,
request.
yeah, sorry to cut you. Anything that's been filed under a petition for confidentiality, whether it's been ruled on or not, more than welcome to ask. Has Big Rivers entered into confidentiality agreements with the interveners?
No, we have not.
Okay, so, so you don't have access to any of the confidential information
No.
yet, is that correct? So have you all sought to enter into a confidentiality agreement with the interveners?
Your Honor, there's such limited confidential information that all is in regards to Pratt Paper Company and the pending negotiating contract that we have not. It's just very limited confidential material in this matter.
Okay, but I guess regardless of how limited it is, have you all offered?
No.
Right, so you can ask questions about anything that you're aware of in the record. If there's anything that you ask about that there's an assertion that it's confidential, then we will go off the record. We'll continue to record, but we'll record on the private record until all the questions are exhausted on that sensitive information. Then we'll go back onto the public record. Effectively confidential for purposes of the Public Service Commission is effectively anything that falls under the Open Records Act. Any of the exceptions that fall under the Open Records Act as being information that's not public. So,
Mr. Chairman, so the Interveners Council didn't ask for any access to the confidential information, which is why we didn't engage in those negotiations. We don't have any objection to her having access to that. So if the commission wants to, direct her, to keep it confidential,
well, and I just figure we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yes, Your Honor.
But ask whatever questions you like, and if council asserts that that's confidential, then we'll just go on to the record and allow you to ask your question on the confidential record.
Thank you. And Mr. Bradley, there were two other gentlemen who offered responses to data requests. I understand that your expertise allows you to testify as to all the information that was supplied as a part of the data request or the application. Is that right?
That's correct, and if it's some details that are outside of my area, then we can do a data request later.
I had questions, Mr. Bradley, about the funding of this proposed easement as well as the substation and the switching station. It seemed to me that there were portions of the record that were inconsistent. Is it Big River's plan to finance this project, and by this project I mean both A, B, and C? Is it Big River's plan to finance this project just out of its general cash reserves?
It'll be financed either through its normal cash flow or through its existing lines of credit. We will not seek RUS financing.
I see. And you mentioned private financing at one point, or private funding at one point in your responses. What did you mean by that term?
Again, the financing, the options are RUS financing through the federal government. We've chosen not to go that route, or through just general cash flow, or through some of the lines of credit that we have already in place. But again,
And there was a statement that you would continue to explore the funding. What was intent there?
I think the intent there is, do we need to draw on our line of credit, or do we just fund it out of our cash flow? That's the two options at this moment.
So is it typical that a utility of this size would fund a project like this out of cash flow?
It's not been, it's been somewhat common for us in the past to do that. We've done both, or We've used RUS financing in the past, and we've funded projects out of cash flow as well.
And projects of, in the 20 million to 24 million price range?
We've done different things for different projects over the years.
And why would one choose to fund it out of cash flow or draw down on your lines of credit rather than seek RUS funding?
The RUS funding, and it can add a lot of time to a project, and we're on a fairly tight schedule to meet Pratt Paper's needs. And so the RUS funding, it ends up adding several months to the project.
Is that because of the requirement of environmental studies?
It's in general their approval process, which does include the environmental studies, but it's their overall process can be time-consuming.
So was the intent of Big Rivers by funding this out of cash reserves or by using its existing lines of credit to avoid the environmental studies?
It was to avoid the delays caused by RUS approval.
Some of which are caused by the environmental studies.
Yeah, RUS would have to weigh in on what all their approval entails, but from my understanding, that is just a component of their approval process.
You request flexibility to move the center, or to move your easement 500 feet in the event of certain contingencies. By moving this, as I understand, your easement is 250 feet?
It's 125 feet total.
125 feet?
From edge to edge is 125 feet.
So, the moving it 500 feet, perhaps, from the proposed center is a substantial variance, isn't it?
And, the remaining, the 125-foot width would be maintained if it had to shift a little bit. We're not going to widen the easement. We would shift it just a bit. And so far, we haven't identified no need to move that.
What have you done so far, then, in terms of being able to determine whether there's a need?
We have consultants doing soil borings to look at the suitability for the construction, and I think maybe 50% of the borings are done. And so far, they've not identified any issues that would require us to move any of our structures.
So why wouldn't you delay in this request until all of those borings were done?
Because of the need to provide service to Pratt on their schedule.
So if you found the need to move the easement, you could be, if the easement's 125 feet in width, you could be moving it a fairly substantial amount within the 500 feet request, right? From the proposed route?
It could move, but it's unlikely to move. Again, and it's just to provide a little bit of, there is some uncertainty. We could uncover something that's underground, become aware of something underground that prevents us from setting poles at that exact location. It's unlikely at this point that will happen, but that part of the petition is just to provide a little flexibility to move, to slide structures just a little bit.
A little or proportionately a lot of flexibility.
Understood.
If you had to move this easement over certain portions of the pathway, if you had to move it within this area of flexibility seek, couldn't you be moving it over a house? Aren't there some houses that are within,
No, we would not do that.
you would not do that?
That's correct.
Um,
And we would not move it to an adjacent property owner either.
So you're asking the commission to enter this certificate and trust you that you would not do that?
We're acknowledging that we provided a very detailed route so that the public could have a clear understanding of the plan. But while submitted, we also tried to acknowledge that as soil borings and things like that are done, that there could be the need to move one or more structures. But again,
think-
based on the initial findings, we don't expect that that will be necessary.
Do you think that these people who live in those houses know that you've asked for flexibility to move the easement perhaps over their home?
It's in the public application for a CPCN.
You make this statement that, you've said this morning that 50% of the soil borings are completed. In the application, you made the statement that you had done a route study and that you had met at least with impacted landowners for the switching statement, or switching station. Is
That's
that
correct.
correct?
That's correct.
Have you met with any impacted landowners over whose property the easement would run?
We've had a phone call or two from some of the property owners that wanted a better or more detailed map or had a couple questions. So we've communicated with a couple of property owners. I don't know how many, but we've communicated with more than one
Do
property
you
owner.
have consents from any of those property owners other than consent to do the borings or the field
We
study?
have the survey permission or the consent to do the boring from the property owners that was needed from, yes.
But as far as any consent from the property owners over which the easement will run,
We have we've purchased no easements yet.
you've said in your application that the property is not within a floodplain. The property over which the easement will run is not within a floodplain. Does that account for the probability that each spring during rainy seasons, that water will be standing in these fields?
We acknowledge that, the floodplain it spoke of was the 100-year floodplain, but that doesn't mean that there might not be, that there could be some flooding along parts of that route.
Isn't it true that there is along parts of this route standing water each and every spring?
There could be.
I mean, have you driven past it over the course of the years?
Mhm.
And there's water standing out there, isn't it?
Yeah,
in the
it's hard
spring?
to avoid all water areas, for sure.
But merely stretching a transmission line over areas that flood every year is not a prohibition?
No, it's not desirable from a maintenance point of view, but it's not always possible to avoid areas that may have seasonal flooding.
And this one does, doesn't it?
It's my understanding parts of that area that do flood at times.
And in your application, you've said that wetlands should be avoided. There are portions of this property over which the easement is proposed, where the land is marshy and where it can't be farmed. does that kind of boggy, marshy land translate to the kind of wetland prohibition that you seek to avoid, the kind of wetlands you seek to avoid?
The, official designated wetlands are for sure scored on the low, receive a high score, which means they're less desirable. And so wetlands and soil conditions and elevation, a lot of factors are included in the scoring as we analyze the different route options. And again, marshy land would be one consideration.
And have you made that, have you been able to make that determination, whether there is some of this boggy, marshy land over which the transmission easement is proposed to run?
The independent consultant that we hired to evaluate the routes included that in their analysis.
And they included it, did they do these borings, this testing that you mentioned?
Not before selecting the route. The soil borings that are ongoing today relate primarily to the subsoil conditions and its suitability to construct a.
Are those the geotechnical investigations you mentioned?
Yes.
So they don't focus on marshy, boggy land?
That's a part of the initial route analysis and choosing suitable routes and then scoring them accordingly. Again, the scoring includes proximity to homes,
And so they
paralleling
got out
roads.
there, I'm sorry.
It includes a number of things, including wetlands and things that you mentioned.
And so they got out there and they walked over this property to determine,
They used LiDAR, which is, they flew the routes, you look at LiDAR, you do field investigations, you drive down the roads, you look at, there's a number of things that went in. They look at available maps, they've reached out to the PVA office in Henderson, a number of things to assess the route.
there was discussion in your testimony and in the responses regarding some existing lines. I think in the first request, or your responses to the commission's first request, in, I think it's item 9, you were asked, state whether the current transmission system would experience reliability issues if the new Pratt paper mill were to be served from existing 161 kV transmission lines. If so, provide a detailed explanation of issues that would be experienced, including any MESO transmission studies of the relevant existing and proposed transmission line. Your answer was the proposed 161 kV transmission line will allow the Pratt paper mill to be served from the nearest existing 161 kV transmission line owned by Big Rivers. No reliability issues are expected with this service plan. It seemed to me that you didn't quite answer the question of the commission, which was whether there would be reliability issues if Pratt were served from existing 161 kV transmission line. Would there be reliability issues?
Which existing 161 kV transmission lines are you referring to?
I'm referring to whatever the commission referred to in item,
The service plan is serving Pratt from an existing the nearest Big Rivers owned existing 161, and I expect no reliability issues with this service plan.
so the transmission line is to get the 161 to Pratt?
Correct. Our nearest 161 is approximately 7 miles from the Pratt facility, so we had to build an extension from our existing line to the Pratt facility.
Are there already existing 161 kV lines that are closer to Pratt?
Not owned by Big Rivers.
But there are existing lines that are closer to Pratt.
Correct.
Are those lines owned by Henderson Municipal
Yes.
Power and Light? Will that line need to be removed or moved, or what will happen with that 161 line?
The Henderson Municipal Power and Light remains, it will be untouched except for where the switching station is being developed. That there will be some reconfiguration of their lines and our lines where we build the 161 kV switching station. Other than that, that 161 kV line remains as is.
And how will what sort of consent, agreement, whatever, will be required from Henderson Municipal as to the switching station regarding its 161?
We've had discussions with them. They've not objected to our service plan. The service plan was evaluated by MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, of which Big Rivers and Hempel are both members. Approval was given in that venue, and again, we've had technical discussions regarding the replacement of the three-way switch with a full-blown switching station.
So have you received consent?
We have not signed a contract or an agreement. The switch is owned by Big Rivers. I believe it's our right to remove that switch and replace it with other facilities.
Let me ask you, in the analysis of the different routes, the proposed routes, there seemed to be one route, and I don't know from the discussion whether it's A or C, or I know there were 3 routes that kind of felt you believed were the better, and the one you chose was C. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
One of the routes, and it was not C, talked about parallel lines. This was, I think, in the first request, maybe item 10. He said there was an alternative, which included the addition of a 161 kV terminal at the Reed substation, 12 miles of 161 transmission overbuilt on an existing Big Rivers 69 kV line, and then 6.5 miles of new terrain. Tell me what that means, 12 miles of 161 kV transmission overbuilt on an existing Big Rivers 69 kV line.
We were looking and analyzing the alternatives to provide 161 kV service to Pratt. So we looked at different routes, different alternatives. That particular one, we would have, to the extent possible, used an existing easements and rebuilt a 69 kV line to include both the 161 and the 69 on the same set of structures for as long as we could. It still would have required a new terrain 161 kV circuit, that line doesn't go all the way to Pratt. It goes, its nearest point to Pratt is approximately 6 miles. So if you follow that existing corridor, you still would have been required to build a 6-mile new terrain 161 kV circuit.
So you say that with Henderson Municipal, it's your substation, you think you have the right, whether that it agrees or not. On this route, you already have an easement,
That's correct.
right, that spans a portion of the route, correct?
Correct.
Would you need the permission of those property owners over which this route runs to hang a 161 transmission line there?
We'd have to review the easements and see what the permissions, what the easements allow.
But you may already have permission to run that route.
If the easement says it's just for one circuit with 3-phase conductors, then we would have had to go back and renegotiate those easements. So I'm not sure, sitting here, I'm not sure how the easements read, but it's possible that we had permission, but I'm not positive. It could be a mix.
Are your easements usually that specific? The ones I've seen at the courthouse don't seem to be that specific.
I think over the years, we've had different easements with different language over the years.
So presumably using your existing easement, you'd still have to acquire 6.5 miles of new easement,
That's correct.
correct?
Yes.
But that's less than the 7.1 mile that you're going to have to acquire under this proposal, isn't it?
It's less of new construction, significantly more from a total construction point of view, but less from a less new.
But you would be disturbing less area, wouldn't you? Because you'd be using presumably your existing line
We would be
for at
impact-
least a part of the way.
Right, we would be disturbing less new, creating, it'd be less new easements, but there would still be an impact on the existing easements because we'd be replacing smaller poles and structures with much larger poles and structures. So it still would be an impact to the property owners along the existing 69 kV corridor.
You've made an estimate in your paperwork here. It may be back under request 1, request for information 1. No, it's not. You've made projections about the costs of these various projects.
Right.
I think you've projected that Project A, which would be the acquisition of the easement and the construction of the easement over that 7.1 miles, would cost $9,375,000. Do those figures sound right?
Yeah, I don't recall where that was in the testimony, but that sounds right.
It's in the, I'm sorry, Mr. Bradley, it's in the application.
Okay.
The application also includes a projection that Project B, which is the switching station, is that correct? Am I remembering correctly? The new Henderson South
It includes an A, B, and a C, you know, the switching station, the substation, as well as the line.
But then later in the application, it breaks out, project B is $6,070,000.
Correct.
And isn't project B the new Henderson South substation that you're, or switching, I'm sorry, Henderson, South Henderson switching station?
That sounds correct.
Now, that switching station does not exist today, does it?
It does not.
It's a new, it will be a new switching station, a new
It'd be a new facility.
structure, a
Yes,
new.
correct.
And you've also made, in the application, made the estimate that project C, which I guess is the substation at Pratt, will cost $4,755,000. Is that correct?
Yes, Project C is estimated to be 4.7 million, correct.
Now, you went on to say, and I think this was in your testimony, that this alternative that would have the route going over existing easements and disturbing less new property would have a higher price tag of $24,800,000.
That's correct.
Would the switching station at Pratt be impacted by this alternative route?
The substation that will be located at the Pratt Paper facility would be the same or very similar in
The
either.
cost would be the same.
Very, very similar in either option, yes.
Under the alternative, would you need the South Henderson switching station?
We would not know.
What- As I understood, or tell me if I'm correct, you do some additional work at this Reed station that already exists.
It would have to be expanded to accommodate that new line that would terminate at that location, that's correct.
And you already, you testified, that's your station, Reed, you already own that?
Correct.
Correct?
Yes,
You wouldn't be acquiring any property as you will if you build this South Henderson station.
that's correct.
You'd be building on what you already have.
That's correct.
So you allotted $6 million approximately for this South Henderson station, which would be eliminated under the alternate, although there'd be some cost to improving your existing Reed. Would the cost, and part of the information, Commissioner, that was not filed were acquisition costs for these different proposals. Would the cost of
Actually, to clarify the record, there is some information in regards to acquisition of land easements within the study route, which is Exhibit B to the application.
would the improving the existing Reed station cost $6 million?
It would be, again, on, the total costs are in the response to Commission Data Request 1-11, 24 million versus the 20 million. But the cost that expand Reed, I don't have that in front of me, but it's probably closer to $1 million or $2 million of that 24 million.
Even though you would have eliminated the $6 million expenditure for South Henderson.
The total project cost would still be more of the alternative that was not selected.
And so where, if the station at Pratt is going to be about the same, you'd eliminate the acquisition cost for the South Henderson station, you'd improve your, you'd renovate or improve, expand your existing read, but you wouldn't have any acquisition cost. You already perhaps have rights over the existing easement in the alternative route. You'd have less acquisition cost. How does this alternative route that disturbs less new property and eliminates the need for South Henderson, what makes that $4 million more expensive?
Because instead of a 7-mile circuit, you're effectively constructing close to 20 miles of even on the existing right-of-way where you're going to overbuild the 69, you're building a brand-new line that would include the new 161, and you would rebuild that 69 kV below it. So that's, while you may make use of that existing easement, you're still rebuilding a line all along that way with much larger structures impacting those property owners. And then on top of that, you're still building 6 miles of across the new easement.
If you already have those easements,
Not the 6 miles, we don't.
Okay.
The 12 miles we have, the 6 we would not.
You've taken the position in your application and in your testimony and your responses that Big Rivers can pay for this out of its reserves, out of its cash flow. This really, you said you've done it before, this really isn't, you say, such a big item. Would increasing the expenditure to 24 million dramatically have an impact on Big Rivers, a dramatic impact on Big Rivers that the present proposal wouldn't have financially?
It would increase the time probably required to construct. From a financial point of view, it would, an extra 4 million is an impact, no matter how you slice it. We could, not to say we can't afford that, we could afford that, but it's still a cost that would be borne by that customer and potentially other customers. And again, we would be, instead of impacting the customers along the proposed route, we're impacting property owners, would be impacting a different set of property owners.
You used some formula indicating that, and this is a quote, this is request 1, item 16, paragraph 3. The quote is, Big River's net utility plant was estimated at $987,686, advising the commission that Project B was only at 0.67% of that. Project C was only 0.52% of that. Based on my math, the $20,200,000 price tag for what's proposed would be 2.2% of whatever this $907 million, however that's calculated. Whereas this alternate route would be 2.73%. So that's a little more than 0.5%. That's not a major impact, is it?
It's not it's not a major financial impact. It's still a significant amount of money, but it's not a major impact to the operation of our company, but it's still, again, $4 million is still a significant amount of money. And the impact to the other a different set of property owners, I think they would consider the impact significant as well.
You've mentioned several times here that it would be a bigger time delay.
Potentially.
Isn't that the real concern, that this get done quickly?
That is one of the concerns. I mean, we're in business to provide the services that the ultimate retail customers need, and so they kind of drive the schedule. So Pratt Paper is a significant addition, and so we're doing what we can to meet their schedule, but at the same time, it's not, I think that construction schedule is aligned with keeping the right-of-way acquisition to a minimum, finding the most efficient route from a property standpoint and from a dollar standpoint and from a constructability standpoint. I think they're not at odds with each other, all of those desires, needs, and requirements.
So it's this concept of the time that you need to get this done for Pratt Paper, that has led you to ask for this 500 feet variance, because you really don't know, because all the studies haven't been done, you really don't know where you're gonna need to quite place this line, right?
I may be wrong, but I think that language has been included in previous applications. I think it's because we do the route study before we file, we think the route study is a key piece of information that needs to be available when we file a CPCN. So performing that ahead of time, including that in the CPCN, gives the commission and the public a lot more detailed information, better information to make their determination. But it's
And-
difficult to do all of the borings and all of the engineering prior to that CPCN filing.
And is the time issue what's led you to suggest this, or to notify the commission that as to the South Henderson substation, geotechnical investigation hasn't been done? The soil may prove to be unsuitable, or it may be liquefiable, or there may be excessive groundwater, so that until those geotechnical investigations are done, you really don't know whether that South Henderson station is at the right spot? Is it the time factor of getting this before the commission so you could meet Pratt's schedule? Is that what motivated that?
Just need
Again,
to
I think
object
with
to
the
a lot
motiva-
of statements that aren't in the record and evidence in any way.
Your, Mr. Commissioner, the information about the switching station location is found in request 1, item 15. So, Commissioner, if you,
Ms. Santana?
I would say, first of all, that was dated early on in the case, and there have been no foundation on what surveys have been done in regards to the status of planning for the switching station. I would also say that in the testimony that the council was providing in her question, she misstated specifically, saying different things about, isn't it true, in misleading question, Your Honor.
I was cross-examining your commissioner.
So, I don't know about the foundation, Ms. Santana. I think that she's asked a significant number of questions about coring and soil, and certainly the witnesses testified to that issue. Why don't you ask the question again, Ms. Freeberger?
All right, Your Honor, Commissioner. Mr. Bradley, the response that you made to the commission's question in request number 1, response to item 15, when you were asked to provide a detailed description as to what conditions may exist that could result in the moving of the switching station and how it might affect other projects. You gave various, you answered that question, as I read it, indicating that geotechnical investigations had not been completed. Was that correct?
That's correct.
And as to the extent I know, there's been no update of this to indicate that other geotechnical analysis have been completed. Is this still your testimony?
The geotechnical analysis are underway at this moment.
But they haven't been completed. I think earlier when you began your testimony, you said you adopted what
The-
you'd said in these data requests, didn't you?
That's correct. I think what you're driving at is typically, I think it's not unusual that the complete package of engineering design is not typically done before the CPCN hearing. It's always a matter of timing. Until you get here, we don't know that the CPCN will even be approved. So you don't want to, you can't do every bit of engineering, every bit of design ahead of time. But what was important is to do the route study so that the commission and the public has the benefit of the proposed route in front of them.
So you're saying you typically come before this commission with incomplete work?
I'd say we would typically file a CPCN with a complete route study so that the commission and public would have the benefit of that route.
You've also said that you don't have agreement from Henderson Municipal. Would that be typical that you would get to this point requesting this certificate without an agreement from another utility whose will be affected at least by the reconstruction of one of these substations?
I would characterize that as the recent, I guess some recent CPCNs didn't include that type of modification of an existing, of converting a switch to a switching station. That's a little atypical, so it's hard for me to say that that's how the timing would generally work with that, since it's somewhat atypical.
Your Honor, Commissioner, I'd like to pass the witness to the staff.
Thank you, Ms. Freeberger. And I apologize, counsel, I neglected to give you all an opportunity to provide your entry of appearance. So if you want to do that and then follow that by your cross-examination.
Mariah Tessie for staff and Tina Frederick for staff. If you can't hear me, Mr. Bradley, will you just let me know? I know we're pretty far apart.
I'm good right now.
Okay. I had one follow-up to some questions that Ms. Freeberger was asking about the switching station project.
Okay.
Just to be clear, is it your testimony that without the Pratt paper mill, you all would not need to do Project B?
Without Pratt paper, we would not be doing A, B, or C.
Okay. And then I have some questions about the MOU that I will try to keep general. I know there's some stuff that's specifically redacted, but if I could go ahead and touch on some of the other. The MOU that was filed appears to be out of date. Is that correct?
I believe that may be correct.
Okay. I'll give you, are you there? Okay.
Yes.
So based on the fact that it's currently expired, have you all been operating under a different agreement or negotiating under a different agreement?
We are very close to completing the actual the contract itself, which will be consistent with the MOU.
Okay, so as far as the terms in the MOU, I have a couple I wanted to ask about. The timeline in particular, I think Ms. Freeberger has touched on the fact that you all have started some of the boring studies and some of the work you need to do to start construction. Do you all still anticipate being able to, if granted the CPCN, meet that August 30th, 2022 deadline?
Yes, if assuming approval for the CPC, we still anticipate meeting that date. It'll be challenging, but we anticipate meeting that.
Okay, and she asked about the boring studies. Have you all completed all the field studies in general? Not just the geotechnical?
Most of the field studies are ongoing right now, the boring and the final placement of the structures that'll be driven by some of that data. It's ongoing right now.
There was a section in the MOU in section 5C that talks about you all providing some equipment.
Where in the initial data request was that located?
That was actually, it wasn't filed until,
The third round?
right, on the 17th.
It's item 3, I believe.
Yes. I just was curious if you all had complied with that provision of the MOU.
You're referring to where it's describing the construction power requirements?
Yeah, the company agreed to provide a transformer, a pad-mounted transformer.
That was, Kenergy provided that equipment, not Big Rivers.
Okay,
Since it's
but that has
construction.
been done?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And then, with regard to the surety bond that's referenced throughout,
Right.
is that still outstanding? Do they
Still
still
in
have a
effect.
surety bond posted?
Yes.
Okay. And now, do you foresee that continuing to be the case while you continue construction?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I do have a question about a specific number, but I wanted to ask you, I know in the MOU you mentioned seeking commission approval. Do you all anticipate filing for approval of the retail and the wholesale agreements with Pratt?
I would expect that we would file those for commission approval, yes.
Okay, but have not done so because they're not final?
We're finalizing them as we speak. We have a near final version that is being reviewed currently.
Chairman, I think my remaining questions have to do with pricing in the MOU and the cost.
So let me ask a few non-confidential questions, and then we'll have a discussion, take a short recess, and then we'll go to your questions. I want to ask about, well, few of these are gonna be on the confidential. So I wanted to ask a clarifying question about a few of your answers to Ms. Freeberger. The running a line from the Reed Station, the Reed Station is in Sebring, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's, as I took it from your response, it says that, and maybe it's not as the crow flies, but as the transmission line would run, that's just under 20 miles, right? 18 and a half miles. 12 and a half of that would run, or 12 of that would run over, run along current transmission line. 6.5 miles would be new. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
So if this is a 161, that would run a line along a 69 kV line. Is that right? That 12 miles would be along a 69 kV corridor?
Yes, what we envision on that alternative is again replacing the 69 with a double circuit that included a 161 and a 69 kV.
Okay, and that was what I was curious. Is this going to expand the right of way, or you would, well, let me ask the first question. 69 and 161, do you all maintain the same right of way?
The 69 kV right of way is generally more narrow.
Right, and so do you know whether or not you would have to expand the right of way in terms of vegetation management to replace the 69? Is it a double circuit 69 kV today or a single circuit?
It's a single circuit today, single circuit 69 kV. It would be replaced with a double circuit 161, 69.
Do you know what your outer edge maintenance is for a 69 kV for vegetation?
I think our 69 is a 100-foot right of way generally, although there are some places where it's narrower than.
Okay,
but
and for the 161 double circuit, you all maintain a 125 foot, is that what you said?
yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the towers that are used, or the facilities that are used for the 69 kV, would you be able to just replace or would you be able to just put a 161 kV line on those 69 kV facilities?
It would be a complete rebuild.
Okay, so you would tear all the 69 kV facilities down and rebuild them with I think your all's testimony says H-frame transmission facilities for the 161. Is that what you're saying?
The existing 69 would be wood pole construction. All those wood poles would be replaced with larger steel that could accommodate both the 161 and the 69 kV line.
Okay, so you would rebuild it and keep the 69 kV?
Correct.
You would
Yes,
just
sir.
take that 69 kV out of service for the time being and then
Right.
recircuit? Okay.
Yep. Yes.
So 6.5 miles of that is new. The total for this other proposal is 7.1 miles, as I understand it. How much of that is new?
For the most part, all of that, all of the 7.2 on the proposed alternative is new right away.
Okay, so the 7.1 is new, but the proposal is to co-locate it, at least in the same right-of-way, or partially the same right-of-way as the current 161 line, is that right?
We'll run it alongside some existing right of way, yes.
Okay,
It'll
but that's
parallel.
Henderson's right-of-way?
Correct.
Okay. Do you all have any agreement to use those right-of-ways, or you would have to get easements in addition to Henderson's easements for that right-of-way?
We'll have to get easements in addition to Temple's.
Okay.
Yes.
And does that reduce your right-of-way size when you can go, like, you, right now it's 125 feet, you were saying, is your standard practice at 161. But do you have to be 125 feet from the Henderson 161 line?
It's desirable to have the full 125 feet so that we can perform the maintenance and ensure that the right of way is clear.
Okay. Are there any, I'll just be honest, so when I was looking at the alternatives, alternative D and E, are you aware of alternative D and E?
Generally, yes.
Yeah, that they effectively run along the entirety of that the Henderson 161 line, all the way to what I assume is either a switching station, or actually in that location, I assume it's a substation off, I don't know, out there, the road coming in from the college.
425.
Thank you. So, both of those seem to go along very similar paths, at least along those right-of-ways. Is there any efficiencies, are there any efficiencies that are gained by following along that Henderson right-of-way as opposed to proposal C, for instance, the preferred choice just creates new right-of-way, at, I don't even know where, maybe at the bypass, and it cuts across.
Right.
Is there any difference, expected difference on like a dollar per line mile basis between running it along or beside the Henderson 161 versus what is effectively a greenfield easement acquisition?
I think there's pros and cons, and sometimes running along an existing transmission line, if you have an outage, the repairs, the maintenance, working alongside what may be an energized line can be a detriment in some ways. From a construction point of view, maybe there's some clearing already done, so maybe from a construction standpoint, things could be easier and things could be more difficult. Again, working alongside an energized conductor with our digger derricks and our equipment. So there's pros and cons.
You have a 69, well, let me take a step. The 69 kV line that comes in, do you have a copy of the preferred route description from, I think it's, page, well, I don't know what page, it's in the 90s of the application. It has the study area and the current and proposed transmission lines.
I have the route study and in front of me if it's in that.
It is in the route study. It's page. Page maybe 55, 54 in the route study.
Fifty-five and fifty-four are
Something along those.
the scoring of the different routes.
Yeah, just right past those. So 58 is the score, is the final scoring
Correct.
of the three, and then page 59 is that preferred route description.
Okay, yes,
Do you see it?
I do.
Okay. So there are, let's just say, the fuchsia, the purple that surrounds the map is the study area, correct?
Correct, yes.
And the blue is existing 161 kV lines,
Yes,
and the red is an existing 345 kV, is that correct?
that's correct.
Do you own that existing 345 kV?
CenterPoint owns it, Big Rivers does not.
Oh, that's the infamous Vectren line, right?
Yep, yes.
The merchant line. Okay,
Yes.
great. So that's owned by, they go under the operating name of CenterPoint today.
CenterPoint
But
Energy,
it's the
yeah.
Vectren line that was approved, certificate by the siting board, is that?
That is correct.
Okay. So, so then there's the yellow that goes, horizontally across the page. That's the proposed line, correct?
That's correct.
Then there's a blue line that goes horizontal across the page. That's the, Henderson 161 kV. Is that correct?
That is correct.
There's another 161 kV that goes from, well, let's just say at a midpoint between 41A and 41 that runs towards, 10 o'clock. Do you see that? It's along the same corridor as the center point 345.
Yes,
Who owns that 161?
Hempel owns that one.
Henderson owns that one as well.
Yes,
And both of those just end at 41A, just before, it looks like just before the jail. Is that a Henderson substation there where those 69 kVs are coming out of as well?
yes,
Okay. So on this page, they're also green. Green is 69 kV, is that right?
yes,
Before I do that, so then there's one last 161 that's on the far right part of the study area. Is that Big River's existing 161 kV?
yes, it is.
Okay, and is there a switching station where the proposed switching station is?
There's a switch there, where the Henderson's line connects to the Big Rivers line.
Okay.
It's done at a three-way switch.
So it's effectively just a 161 tap as much as it is,
It's
more than it is a whole switching station?
Correct.
Okay. So then there's the significant amount of 69 kV infrastructure. There's some on the right-hand side of the screen. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and that's in the corridor between the Parkway, the Audubon Parkway, and the Breathitt Parkway, right? The 69 I-69 corridor. Do you see
Right.
that?
Yep.
Is
It's-
that your 69 facilities, or is that Henderson's 69 kV facilities?
Part of that would be ours, and as you get closer to the north, we tie into the city of Henderson as well. So I think what you're seeing there on the far right side is Big River's own 69 kV.
Okay, and then the left part of the study area, there's also a good amount of 69 kV facilities. Do you see that?
Yes.
And there are a few industrial sites out there by the off 425, but north of that is 69 kV infrastructure. So there's a 69 kV line that comes from the south. Is that your 69 kV line, or is that Henderson's?
We have, there's a little bit of both through there, and it's hard for me to make it out. We have
Okay.
we have some 69 Big Rivers own some in that area. Henderson has a little bit of 69, and KU has a 69 kV line
Okay.
right near Pratt Paper.
And is that because does KU serve an area west of Henderson, is that right? Well, I know they serve areas south of Henderson.
They serve kind of around Henderson pockets.
Okay. So this entire area around Pratt, just so I'm clear, the 345 is not yours in that, let's say, a couple of miles each direction. The 345 line is not yours.
Right,
The 161 in the area is not yours.
right,
Only a little bit of the 69 is yours, right?
correct.
And I take the testimony as saying that you don't have the headroom in the 69. Well, let's take a step back before I ask that. So, my assumption was, since you're proposing a substation, is that Pratt won't be taking it 161. They won't be taking it.
They'll step down, we'll step down to 12.5 kV.
And that's what I took, is that they're required in the application to build their own 12 kV, 12.5 kV internal system. Is that right?
Right, we'll own the transformer where it steps down from 161 to the 12.5, and everything on the low side then will be owned by Pratt.
They'll take it at distribution. Okay. So there's not headroom in the 69 kV system that you own in the area to serve the demand. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And did you study the current system? So you have a study that you provided that showed thermal violations.
Right.
Is that based on the current or expected, is that based on the expected topography of the in-service date of Pratt without this proposal?
The 69 kV studies did not include any of the proposed 161 kV facilities. It looked at serving that load from the existing Big River 69 kV system with the loads, with Pratt load and Big Rivers and area load forecasted to a future year.
Okay. And so, that's from the MTEP, right?
The MISO transmission expansion plan models, yes.
And those model voltage and thermal violations in outer years to determine needs for additional transmission. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
Okay. Did the current topography with this additional load, did it also create voltage issues?
Yes.
In addition to thermal issues?
Yes.
Have those been identified, or was just thermal violations that you all identified in that application?
When we looked at the 69 kV option, I think we identified both thermal and voltage violations.
Okay. So the only ones I saw in the application are the thermal ones. Do you know if you provided the voltage violations as well?
Let me
Well,
look.
we can ask it as a post-hearing data request, and we can clarify that if you did, please point to them, but I didn't see anything.
I
under
thought we
thermal.
flagged them on the table, but I could be wrong. Well,
Okay,
we can
I'll look at it again, and if we don't have it, we'll ask it as a post-hearing. So have you done a restudy with, the MTEP with the 161 upgrade? Have you all done that that modeling to ensure that it satisfies or that it fixes all the thermal voltage violations?
We did, yes, and MISO also, we submitted the plan to MISO, and they approved it. You know, they will do their own validations as well, so, but yes, those studies have been done.
Okay, and you all, on a chart, so I think maybe in the application, or in data, because I forget where it was now, you indicated the different milestones that are required. First was getting board approval all the way through the final date, or, you know, through in-service date. One of those is MISO approval. Is that the same MISO approval that you were just discussing?
Yes,
Okay, so then, in addition to getting board approval, you've filed with the PSC, but haven't gotten approval from us yet, but you have gotten MISO approval.
that's correct.
Have you met any of the other milestones that are included on that page?
I'd have to look at that.
Okay.
What was that? What page?
That was the attachment to PSC 3.3.
Yeah.
I believe it's the final page of that attachment.
What was that?
It's at the very end of the MOU.
PSC 3.3.
Oh, okay.
Are you there?
Yes,
So there was PSC approval, which is this CPCN, RUS approval, which you all determined not to seek RUS financing for this, correct?
correct.
Then MISO approval, and so you're saying that's satisfied?
Yes.
And then membership documentation, do you know what that is?
I do not. I'm assuming that, I don't know if it's the contract itself. I'm not sure or if that's a Kinergy requirement for their,
What is construction power?
that was the Kinergy service with that pad mount transformer.
At Mountain Transformer,
So-
okay. And so I would assume that's been provided, that
Yes.
you're aware of?
Yes.
Design engineering,
Most of our design engineering is either complete or almost complete, yeah.
and is your design engineering waiting on the outcomes of the geotechnical
Yes, that'd be,
reviews?
yes, before the final.
And you said you've cored or taken samples from half the parcels at this point, is that right?
It was characterized to me that we're about 50% of the way through, so roughly half, yes.
So you're waiting to acquire easements, are you waiting to procure equipment?
There is some equipment that's ordered, but yes, we're still in the that's still outstanding.
Okay. Now, I want to ask about RUS approval. It says here RUS approval 44 days. Do you have any experience with the processing time it takes for RUS to provide approval for financing?
The last time we submitted a project for RUS approval, it was probably a year or better process.
Well, so I'm just gonna say, 44 days
It's-
is not my experience
That's
with
not been our experience either.
utilities seeking RUS approval. Have you all had problems getting even responses at all back from RUS?
We've had challenges, especially in the most recent one related to the Brandenburg projects, and there were some challenges with communication, there was challenges with
Can you
staff.
be,
turn-
I know you're trying to be polite, they're probably not watching this hearing, can you be a bit more direct with, like, did you all just you couldn't hear back from them? You didn't hear back from them?
Yes, that's true.
That's a challenge, okay.
I think they had some staff turnover. It was in the middle of COVID. We had a lot of difficulties communicating with them.
Okay. So the remaining questions that I have, council, are related, and I think may be follow-ups to staff's questions around the confidential information in the memorandum of understanding, which has expired. And so don't know. I don't know how long you all sought protection for that, but it is not an active document, it doesn't sound like. This is what I would propose. I know that Ms. Freeberger hasn't seen that information yet. We are gonna have questions for them. We certainly will ask them on the confidential session since we haven't ruled yet on the petition, I don't believe. Let's take a recess until 10:45. I would ask that during the recess, you all confer, and see if you all can come to some sort of understanding prior to us coming back onto the record about, participation and involvement in that confidential session with Ms. Freeberger and her clients.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll be in recess until 10:45. back on the record in case number 2022-00012. Ms. Santana, Ms. Freeberger, before we went off, we were discussing that staff council and myself had questions based on confidential information that's been filed under request for, or a petition to be under seal in this case. It was my understanding that Ms. Freeberger and her clients had not been privy to that confidential information and had not entered into an NDA prior to the hearing today. Have you all been able to provide her that information so that she could participate in the confidential portion of the hearing, or is there some other resolution to the issue?
We have provided the information, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. And so we can proceed with the entire, everybody in the room during the questioning, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll go back to you, Ms. Tyson. You have questions?
I had a few, Your Honor.
Okay, so at this time, Candace, we'd like to go into the confidential record. Please let us know where we are. Ms. Santana, let's unlock, I don't know that we need to, but, right. We're back on the public record. Ms. Santana, do you have any redirect of this witness?
No, yet, I don't, Your Honor.
Okay, any additional questions, Ms. Freeberger, on the public session?
No, Your Honor.
Counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman, you had asked about the MTEP study and whether there were I think voltage violations. So there is a little bit of information in there. I don't know if you want to get into that now, but,
Yeah,
so it's like PSC, item 3-2, like the very last page, there's a little bit of that in there.
well, so it shows there are no voltage violations.
It shows some
Anything
voltage.
below 92% is a voltage violation. The last column on page 5 of 5, the far right column.
Well, let's go to that. If you don't, you have it in front of you, you have that,
Yes.
page 5 of 5 of staff 3-2?
Yes,
So a voltage violation is in excess of what?
anything below, on our 69 kV, our system, 92% is our accepted criteria. So anything less than 92% or anything less than 0.92 would be a violation.
So all these are voltage drops because they're all below 92%.
They're all below, yes, that is
Okay.
correct. Those are all violations.
At the different loading levels, right?
With the different with the different scenarios,
Okay.
yes. So in the 80s is a significant voltage violation.
I guess what I don't understand is the scenario where Geneva Junction, I assume this is that western part of the system, out towards the western part of Henderson, is that right? Where Geneva Junction and Geneva substations are?
Yes,
So those are both voltage violations because they're between voltage drops at a certain loading level and a certain place. What is the scenario in which that voltage of 0.851 at Geneva Junction occurs? Because I can understand that like for thermal, the reason I ask is thermal, let's take that 5 of 5. At Reed EHV, where is Reed EHV?
Reed EHV is at Seabury.
Okay, so there's a Reed switchyard and a Reed EHV. Are they both in Seabury?
Yes, they're almost next to each other. They're less than or a mile apart from each other on
Okay.
our Seabury
And-
complex.
Reed switchyard steps down the voltage from the plant to the transmission system, is that right?
The Reed switchyard includes 161 and 69 kV buses, so there's this, and Reed EHV includes 345, 161, and 69 kV.
Okay, so Reed EHV at, let's say, at the Reed Niagara tap with, 62 MVA demand, right? That's that first column?
The first columns are, each of the columns on the loading is showing the percent loading of the rating of the facility, of the
Okay.
particular facility described.
Okay, so at the proposed demand or at the expected demand, the percent of loading at the Reed Niagara tap, or, let's say, what does that 28% of loading represent?
That one is not a violation. What that's showing is the line's rated at 63 MVA, so that particular line section is only rated at, the actual flows are 28% of its rating.
Right, and the rating is at 63 MVA, and that is the line that runs from the Reed Niagara tap to the Reed EHV, correct? That section is at 28% of its loading.
That particular line section from the Reed substation to the Niagara tap.
So
Under
then
with-
what does Geneva Junction then? Is that saying that the voltage violations with this additional load under the current topography of the system, that there's a voltage drop on the line between Reed EHV and Geneva Junction? Is that what the last column represents with the 0.851?
It's showing, the whole first row with if the Pratt load is source from the 69 kV line that exits Reed EHV substation. It runs from Reed EHV, Corydon to Geneva, Riverport. So if that load is added to that 69 kV circuit, the first row shows the lines that would be overloaded and the voltage violations. That maybe the confusing part is some of those columns, for the sake of consistency, some of those columns aren't really impacted by that load until you put that load on a circuit from the Reed switchyard or from the Henderson County substation. So it's showing the same set of lines and the resulting loading, but if the load is over on a different circuit, it's not going to impact. So under this scenario, Reed to Niagara tap is not carrying any of the Pratt load. That's why it's 28% of its rating.
Right, but what I want to make sure of is that this is showing that under the current topography, if the load for Pratt is served under the current system, without the new 161 kV, that the line between, and this is on page 505,
Yeah.
the line between Reed EHV and Geneva Junction, far right, first line, far right column, far right column, that line has a voltage drop.
Yeah, those are all either substations or switching points that are served off of that circuit, and that's the voltage at that location.
Okay.
In other words,
And you only-
Geneva, there's a Geneva, Kenergy has a Geneva substation. The voltage at that substation, if the Pratt paper is served off of that line, will drop to approximately 85%.
And you only include, so, that's what I'm trying to clarify, because it wasn't obvious, and I appreciate Mr. Campbell pointing it out. So all of these substations or lines listed in that last column on page 505 are also lines or substations that are included on the top row of the previous, on this page or the previous 4 pages. But the only time they're listed here is when there is a voltage violation, is that right?
Correct, yeah. On the line, on the thermal issues, we showed all the lines under all scenarios, whether or not there was a violation. The voltage we only showed locations when there was a violation on voltage. So Geneva, Riverport, the paper mill itself, and Weaverton sub on that first scenario all have low voltages.
But for instance, Niagara, never heard of that. Anthoston
And Foston,
and Thawston doesn't have a voltage drop in that first scenario,
in
right?
that first scenario, that line section is not impacted by the load served from a different circuit. So that line is not impacted, and so the substation served off of that. So you don't see the Niagara substation showing up with a voltage violation because it's served off of a different circuit.
All right, that's helpful, thank you.
And that's a little confusing.
So the presumption is that every substation that's not included in that last row, last column,
Right.
has, the voltage does not drop below 92%.
Correct.
Okay. Any additional questions?
No, Chairman, thank you.
Council, any additional questions? I have none. Do you all have any redirect on the public record?
No.
Is there any reason this witness can't be excused? All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Any other witnesses, Ms. Santana?
No.
And it's my understanding from your filings, Ms. Freeberger, that the only witnesses you would intend to call would have been the witnesses that Big Rivers called. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I don't have any post-hearing data requests of my own anymore, Mr. Canoff. Does staff have any? Ms. Freeberger, do you have any questions that you couldn't answer today that would require data requests post-hearing?
No,
Okay.
no, Mr. Chairman.
So it's my understanding that there's a, this is under 0207, whatever it was. The section of 278.020 that this is followed under requires an order from the commission within, I think, 120 days of filing. I put that at the initial count on the 9th or 10th. I think it's the 10th. Does Big Rivers anticipate or have an interest in filing anything post-hearing? Any briefs?
I mean, I think we would only want a response if Ms. Freeberger files something. Otherwise, I think we're prepared to submit the case on the record.
Ms. Freeberger, do you have any interest in filing a brief post-hearing with the understanding it would need to be filed fairly soon, given the statutory date in the case?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, with that, and understanding there are no post-hearing data requests, we'll, I guess, take under submission the case today, and work towards an order prior to the statutory date in this matter. We understand, I think we have a couple of outstanding petitions. Is there anything else I need to take under consideration before we adjourn the hearing?
No.
Ms. Freeberger?
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Counsel? Okay. With that, this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Your Honor.